Welcome to the Coach Doctor podcast, a podcast where we discuss aspects of sports coaching from grassroots to grandstands. I'm your host, James Barkell, and on this podcast, we hear from academics who research coaching. We talk to coaches on the front line from development levels through to professional coaches, and we discuss other elements of successful sporting programs with experts and practitioners from a range of sports science fields, motivational psychology, strength and conditioning, and many other elements required for successful performance. If you'd like to know more about what we do at the Coach Doctor, you can visit our website, thecoachdoctor.com.au, and learn more about our services, or follow me on Instagram at thecoachdr or Twitter at James_Barkell for more regular information. In this episode of the Coach Doctor podcast, I'm talking with Sam Miller. Sam is the CEO and founder of Proteus Motion. Proteus is a groundbreaking training system that has transformed the world of fitness and human performance. It has expanded the scope of quantifiable human movement from a limited 5%, primarily focused on vertical pushes and pulls like squats and deadlifts, to an astonishing 98%, encompassing nearly every conceivable angle and type of movement. If you have watched the Netflix series Quarterback, you can see Superbowl Champion Quarterback Patrick Mahomes using this technology as part of his preparation in becoming the most dominant quarterback in the NFL. Proteus is now used by sporting franchises in the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, the National Hockey League, golfing institutions such as the PGA, university sporting programs, and also medical institutions for recovery and rehabilitation purposes. Whilst the technology itself is revolutionary, Sam's story is a remarkable blend of innovation, grit, and self-belief. But I will let Sam tell you all about that himself. Sam, thank you for joining me and welcome on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm a pleasure to be here.
No problem at all. First of all, just quickly, can you tell our listeners where in the world you are at the moment?
I am currently in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay, in South Carolina, but your company, correct me if I'm wrong, is based in New York?
It's headquartered in New York, and that's where I founded the company. I was there for about a decade. Our team is largely remote, spread across the US, but we do have an office in Brooklyn. And I ended up in South Carolina just at the beginning of COVID. We were looking for childcare and some space, and we ended up down here, and that turned into 4 years later. Now we live here.
Okay, interesting. And I've listened to a lot of interviews with you, and I think predominantly they're based in the States. Mm-hmm. Just a question: is this your first interview with Australia?
It is, and I'm really excited about it.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks so much for allowing me to have a chat with you. And it's really interesting. Some of the equipment you've designed looks fantastic, and I'm really interested in talking about it. But Sam, one of the interesting aspects to me is the backstory of how you started. Could you explain the journey from your childhood to how you started Proteus?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It's been a journey indeed, and it's now I'm seven plus years into it, and every day feels like day one. So, but yeah, the genesis of Proteus is it really starts when I was a young athlete. I grew up outside of Boston, Massachusetts. Was an athlete of all sports. My main sport was soccer. I had a really painful joint condition in my knee, which put me in and out of physical therapy and training between ages 9 through 15. And I distinctly remember walking out of a training session in my teens with a teammate who was recovering from an oblique strain or oblique tear, and I had osteochondritis dissecans and serious hamstring issue to accompany that. And we each had a sheet of paper that had the same training program on it. And this exposed this, this, for me, that was the start of this understanding of this lack of personalization. And my conclusion, even at that age, was that this is not an issue with the great trainers, clinicians, coaches, etc. It's there is around the limitations of measurement tools and technology that are easy to get information to then be able to apply that towards personalized training. Fast forward a number of years, I went to Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee, studied economics and history, got into a completely different career in engineering, in the construction management space, building, huge hospital systems and biosafety labs. And I had a huge entrepreneurial itch. I was following the quantified self movement a lot. And one of my observations was like there's a really exciting evolution of new technology and measurement tools and capabilities, and this growing consumer interest in quantifying new human performance metrics. And what I realized was that there was all these advancements in sleep and recovery and body imaging and biomechanics and these other pillars of human performance, but as it relates to physical strength and power measurement, it still seemed very antiquated, and the measurement seems to be very one-dimensional. And an underdeveloped area, which ultimately has created this huge void in data and understanding, which to me seemed obvious because of my past experiences, and knowing the need for it, but also recognizing as an athlete, like the importance of rotation in sport. And so the lack of being able to quantify those things seemed crazy to me. What it concluded, though, is that, as you know, strength, for example, is the ability to move against a force. So if you are trying to measure strength for a multi-planar movement or a 3D move, a rotational movement or a 3D movement, you need 3D forces. That doesn't exist. And you can't get that from a cable machine, which is a rope, essentially, or another training tool. So what I realized is we actually have to create a new machine altogether. And that was that realization that realized, wait a minute, well, if we can do that, then we can unlock this new data set, which is multiplanar strength and power, which is not really a known, easily quantifiable thing. And so I started thinking about this a lot and realized we got to create this new machine. And I was inspired by something that my father had invented at MIT in the early 90s. And he spun out of MIT. He was trying to develop something for sports-specific rehabilitation. He was working in the robotics lab. And he's a brilliant mechanical and electrical engineer. Came up with this mechanical system for three-dimensional movement, but it didn't do anything. It was just kind of this, contraption that he actually like tinkered with in the basement of my house growing up. And I realized if I can take that construction and make it work and provide three-dimensional forces, which require this like a rigid arm, so to speak, instead of a rope, right? Then we could build software and data around that. And so that was the beginnings of Proteus, and I founded the company in 2016. We've very humble beginnings. First 4 years was as building machines with my own hands, early versions of it, prototypes, driving it around in a truck, trying to get people to try it. And that was a number of years, a team of 1 to 3 people. And then in 2021 is when we came out with our current machine model, Proteus 2.0. And, we've gone from, 20 prototypes to more than 500 machines out in the US and Canada. We have 80,000 users, including some of the best athletes in the world across all major sports. But interestingly, our users range from age 8 to 98. And there's some really interesting shifts in the market that are driving some of the new demographics that are being attracted to us. So we've got a number of patents that we've developed. We've got great team, awesome, investors that have kind of backed us on this route and on this journey. And we're really we've got a tremendous amount of momentum, and ultimately we think we're going to be establishing the new universal standard for physical strength and power measurement.
Yeah, wow. So it's a pretty interesting story, and I guess from your experiences as a younger person with injuries and rehabilitation through to, I guess, your initial career direction, and then into something that your father initially started off building, that you ended up taking over and developing into some fantastic equipment. Sam, I've got to say, it's a sexy looking piece of equipment. Um, it to me, when I was looking at it on the videos, it almost looks like something, a futuristic mounted laser blaster, something that you might see in Star Wars or a Terminator type movie. But for our listeners, it's quoted as being one of the smartest pieces of equipment you can find in a gym. What makes it stand out from everything else?
Great question. I mean, aside from the design, which is award-winning and certainly unique, and we developed after years of hands-on experience and me trying to build, versions of this ourselves. So we knew what we were doing when we built this version of Proteus 2.0. What makes it stand out is, I think it's pretty simple. It's we've got this patented hardware and software that provides 3D forces to measure 3D strength and power, which enables comprehensive assessment of functional strength and power for the first time ever. So we have a turnkey solution that is able to, in a matter of minutes, produce not just measurements, but incredible insights around comparisons and context, areas of strengths and weaknesses, recommendations for improvement, and even outputting kind of action plans and programming for any conceivable human movement, particularly rotational and multiplanar movements. So that is the primary thing. So this is like the data hub that helps inform what exercises someone needs to do and how, or what movements they need to work on, what equipment to use even. And so really what separates us from other tools and technologies, like, this is not a cable machine. It's not meant to be compared to one, because we think cable machines are great. We think they have great applications. This is its own animal. So where we fit in is, if you are a business organization or an individual that cares about physical strength and power, and you live in a three-dimensional world, we think that you should care about measuring three-dimensional strength and power for those movements. And this is essentially the only tool in the world that's able to comprehensively do that, and do it in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, great. Like you just mentioned, the three-dimensional world, and we do live in a three-dimensional world, and everything we do requires three-dimensional movements. And one of the things that you just talked about was pulley machines, and you could be mistaken, or somebody who doesn't understand the technology could be mistaken, that it's a glorified pulley machine, and sometimes a pulley might replicate some movements. But from a strength and power perspective, what does Proteus do that, I guess, from the, not just the testing perspective, but the forces, I mean, the push, and the pull forces are, in my understanding, quite different from a pulley machine.
Yeah. So it's funny. We used to get a lot of mistaken comparisons to, this is like a fancy extraneous tool for training, and why would I get this on a cable machine? And for those who, that's really an opinion that someone would have if they just simply don't have any idea what we do. Um, it's not in the same category. So, and for a couple of reasons. One is, my perspective, and I think most people's perspective, is that any training tool, well, let's take, for example, a pulley machine, its primary purpose is for uh, resistance training benefits, right? Proteus provides resistance training benefits that are totally unique and fundamental, but that's its secondary benefit. And let's talk about that secondary benefit first. So I mentioned before that the crux of Proteus is we created a new machine that uses magnets, basically, to provide what we're calling 3D forces. We've patented this internationally and in the US, which is called 3D resistance. And what 3D resistance is, people describe it as it feels like moving through a fluid or a force field. So it's constant force, no matter what speed or direction you move. And there are pulley machines, for example, that deliver constant force. The key difference is that it's in a single direction. And that direction is when you're moving directly away from the pulley. So if you are moving directly away, but then you move off to the side, you're encountering a completely different, unpredictable force. So you're getting a completely inconsistent resistance throughout a multiplanar movement like a rotation. And that fact makes it physically impossible to get any sort of reliable measurement for a multiplanar movement from a pulley machine. But that's not what a pulley machine is meant to do. That's just like an add-on that they, some of those companies put in afterwards, which those are great little, the numbers that come up, and that some of that, can be helpful. That's we're not knocking that, but its primary benefit is as a training tool. So what we do though is we quantify those movements accurately and precisely, to the extent that at least at minimum in the golf and the baseball world, they've been independent. So certain metrics and movements have been independently established to be highly correlative. I hate to use the word predictive, but those are the words of the researchers that have kind of done some of these studies of club head speed for golf and exit velocity for baseball players, as well as throwing velocity. And we've got basically more than a billion data points. That's new normative data. It's the world's only database for multiplanar strength and power, those movements, right? And it's massive and growing exponentially. So when you finish a Proteus test, like, we will make recommendations for, based on your results, where on the by movement category that you've done, whether it's rotation, full body rotation, whether it's, lower extremity vertical pushing, right? Where did each of those moving categories fall in the kind of the force velocity curve? And therefore, what do you need to work on and why? And what velocity do you need to be training at? And so we provide recommendations that say, based on your results, which you might have gotten in full body in 5 minutes, you might test like 15, 20 movements, typically in our standardized tests. We have a whole library of tests that you can do, and you can build your own, test any movement. And that becomes the basis for a coach, for example, to say, all right, well, this individual should be using these tools. And in some cases, we'll say, like, you can do all these things for training on Proteus, but you probably get better results for certain, if it's a strength deficiency for a lower extremity movement, for example, you can do those on Proteus, but there are other training tools that are going to deliver better results. So we're like, you get tested on Proteus, and then it informs what do you need to work on and why. So secondarily, though, some of the movements, especially if you care about, we like to say triplanar power, Proteus's 3D resistance is like the ultimate tool for achieving benefits on that front. And an example of this is, like, this is the reason why Patrick Mahomes uses Proteus 3 times a week for the last 2 years. And some of that you may have seen in the Netflix series Quarterback, where we're in 3 episodes organically. So it has a very interesting, unique place as a training tool on the force velocity kind of spectrum, because of the benefits of 3D resistance, constant resistance in all directions, no matter what speed or direction you move. Feels like training underwater. It's almost entirely a concentric muscle contraction, which is very, very unique. So we never claim that, like, this is the one especially for athletes, like, this is not the one-stop shop for training. For measurements, it's essential. But for training, it's a tool in your toolkit. amidst cables, pulleys, you know, and all these other great training tools. So we find that Proteus is used. It's one of the reasons it makes it really sticky in these businesses, because everyone that walks in the door of a sports performance facility that has Proteus, they get tested on Proteus. And then that information basically is like a cheat code for a trainer to build a program off of. We actually have a new feature that we started to kind of automate that, or make that even dramatically easier and output those programs automatically. But this is a tool that empowers trainers and coaches to deliver a higher quality of service and and better results in a shorter amount of time. So they'll build a program off of that, and usually they'll say, all right, well, you're going to use Proteus for these movements or these exercises, and then you're going to use these other tools. And so because of that, they're not just testing on it every week or 3 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. They're in between those assessments on Proteus, they're using as a training tool, and you can use it daily because it's concentric. So it's become a staple tool in these facilities, completely unique. Like we said, it's its own category. And it fits into any environment with any combination of tools, because it just fills primarily the gap around strength and power measurements in a way that no one else can.
One of the things that you really, really stuck out to me then was the whole movement becomes concentric. And I'm trying to get my head around how that might actually feel, because I'm so used to, using traditional gym equipment where you've got a push and then you resist against the, eccentric forces, and trying to understand that in my head, or work out that feeling, is quite, I don't know, it's quite hard for me to imagine. You really have to use the equipment, don't you?
You have to use it in like it's we hear this often, and it makes sense. I mean, there's not a comparable. So the best thing that we can say to kind of try to envision what this feels like for a user is perform a movement underwater. And then if you adjust the resistance, let's pretend I snap my fingers, and now you're in a pool of honey.
Yep. Okay.
And then now you're in a pool of, fast drying cement that's, not quite dried yet, but it's about to, you know what I mean? And anywhere on that spectrum. And so what it does is it creates, well, first of all, we've done research with one of our early partners is the Hospital for Special Surgery, HSS, in New York. It's the #1 orthopedic hospital in the United States. We did research in their motion lab to look at they use surface EMG and fine wire on 8 different shoulder muscles, 10 healthy male individuals, and they did the same exact movements, shoulder specific in this case, on Proteus, then a pulley and free weights, and in randomized order. We were just observing. We didn't conduct the research, and what they found was that, just like everyone reports, and what intuitively makes sense that would be the case, is that for the targeted muscles in certain specific shoulder movements, Proteus produces up to 95% greater peak muscle activation than a free weight or a cable, and 87% higher muscle activation duration over the course of a single rep compared to a free weight and a cable machine. And there's no surprise, because it's exactly what people report. And it's because of that, because you're being resisted throughout the entire range of motion. So think about if you're using a pulley to do, I don't know, you just take a PNF D2 flexion extension, right? Those end ranges, right, is where you're gonna experience, okay, you're benefiting from, you're countering lower resistance because of inertia and because of the angle of the rope. And this is why when you're using a pulley, like you want to stand in a certain position relative to the machine, versus Proteus, which has a rigid carbon fiber tube arm and 3-dimensional force resistance. It doesn't matter where you stand or in relation to the machine, and it doesn't matter what part of the movement. It's whatever you're doing, wherever you're moving, you're encountering a constant level of resistance, and this produces this really incredible engagement and neuromuscular stimulation that has benefits across the fascial system. We see that people, it exposes, you can't hide, you can't hide unathleticism. It's like you have to produce force from the ground up, even if you're doing an upper extremity movement. People often are putting their hand, over their abs because they're feeling the stabilization that's required and needed to perform any movement. And it's just fundamentally new and different and unique.
And from a testing perspective, you're getting data points all the way throughout the movement. And because it's concentric the whole time, if I'm just trying to think of a movement like a throw, for example, so a lot of your baseball players or even that hitting motion of doing a rotation type movement, you're measuring data points all the way through the swing or the swing movement of like say a baseball swing, for example, and you can almost pinpoint at what aspect. Is it the early part? Is it the mid part of the swing, or later on in the swing where the athlete, I guess, needs to improve? Am I sort of on track with that idea?
Yeah, let me make a let me redirect that, because when we first started Proteus and I was building those, early prototypes with my own hands years ago, we were really like we've started with in kind of with a very niche focus in elite baseball is kind of where we started, and then we've since expanded to golf and football and all these other sports, and then from beyond elite we now have tens of thousands of youth, high school, college athletes, and then now we have 10,000 or so users that are 35 to 65 years old. That's the fastest growing demographic of users we have. So the reason I bring this up is because we developed this initially, and when we first started using it, is trying to use it as a simulation tool of like doing throwing motions and swinging. And we very quickly realized like that is the wrong direction. If you are trying to simulate a throw, don't do it on a machine. Go throw, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's for numerous reasons, including safety. And it's also not what our value is. So we quickly realized, okay, wait a minute, actually, we need to go to towards the kind of, we call them more standard movements, but the kind of movements like standard trunk rotation, plyometric and non-plyometric, single leg squat, horizontal abduction, adduction, shot putting type movements, a press and row, bicep tricep curl, single, unilateral and bilateral. And so we realized that, well, wait a minute, hold on. Why are we kind of going into these sport specific like motions? No one needs that, right? If you're going to measure somebody's throw and then they should be doing a throw. Otherwise it's not going to be, comparable or transferable. So I say that because we steer people away from not just thinking about Proteus as a simulation machine, but in practice, it's rarely ever used, if ever, as a tool to simulate a movement. Instead, an example, let's just think about baseball for 1 second, because we literally in the last 2 months, we've now established that if you do a shot put movement on Proteus, every 50 watts that you improve in power watts is the measurement for power. It translates to 1 mile an hour gained in exit velocity, right? And similarly for trunk rotation acceleration, not power, acceleration, every 3.57 meters per second squared that you gain in trunk rotation acceleration translates to 1 mile an hour gained in throwing velocity, right? So with some of these like elite coaches that we focused on winning over initially, we first got into market, like an Eric Cressy. I don't know if you're familiar with Eric Cressy. He's one of our early adopters in Proteus, and then became a collaborator and advisor And we've got, fed Proteus machines with them, facility for, they've run, I don't know, 10,000 tests over the years, and incredible insights. But we've basically established, a variety of different, we have a Cressy performance test, and that test is 17 movements, upper extremity, lower extremity, full body, um, you know, uh, bilateral, unilateral. There's a whole variety: press and row, truck rotation, shot put, plyo, non-plyo, truck rotation, some lower extremity movements, lateral bounding. There's even a jump. And it's those combination of movements that we developed in concert with him based on what he believed were the most important movements for baseball players. And then we kind of refined and tweaked that as we started to compare that against, well, how do these correlate with actual measurements, from a TrackMan, for example, for throwing. We refined it. And now we've got the 17 movement Cressy performance test. And it's mostly movements that everyone knows, right? Like any athlete, we have tens of thousands of youth athletes, and they're doing press and a row movement, right? So I don't want to get off track from your question, but what it does then is, yes, it is measuring at a super high frequency. We have 20 proprietary metrics. So it's measuring power, acceleration, deceleration, linear distance range of motion, not joint angle range of motion, work, intensity, and even mapping power throughout any movement, like a truck rotation in three-dimensional space. Just a massive amount of data, 1,000 data points per rep, basically. And we realized early on that we were really proud about all this data and this IP that we've developed around patents and the technology. And we realized it's too much information. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
And then we were like, okay, we need to scale this back. We need to hide some of this in the interface, and you can still output and export and even API integrations with other tools if you want to have access to this incredible wealth of data. But from a software interface standpoint, we've made it really simple, where it's just, for example, what's your biological power age, right? What areas of the body are improving? What's not? How do you compare to someone like you by age, sex, height, weight, sport, position? Everything is cloud-based. You compare yourself to a pro of any sport, and we'll show you the sample sizes, because in some cases we're the only tool in the world that has this. You might do something obscure and it's like the sample size is 8 that you're comparing against. So you make the decision if that is meaningful. So it's a wealth of this information, and it basically helps pinpoint. We like to look at the difference between power and acceleration specifically, because that imbalance, we'll call it, determines if you need to work on, if you are power dominant, if you're speed dominant, if you then need to work on explosive movements, right, at a low resistance and a high velocity versus, all the way down the curve, you need to work on strength at 0 to 0.75 meters per second with a much higher load. And this helps you pinpoint exactly what type of movements and what type of training an individual needs in a matter of minutes. That's been hugely powerful for a lot of coaches. So that is a very long answer.
No. I think what you just finished with at the end there is really amazing, that it can, I guess, test and give you a response in terms of power, acceleration, and straight up strength. And if, like you said, depending on what the requirements are, it will give you the response. And just thinking back to like a trunk rotation, and you've got a way to test acceleration, power, and strength through a trunk rotation. I mean, that's something we're not able to. I've never heard of anyone being able to do that, or remotely try and do something similar to it.
And think about how crazy that is, though, because people need that information. These are the movements that matter in life. I think in many ways more so than some of the traditional movements that are typically tested. But the reality is just because those traditional movements that, are tested to date, that's what you can test.
Hmm.
And so our view is like, well, we're kind of missing, 95% of human movement. And it's just because there's not an easy way to do it and not an accurate way to do it. And we developed a system that makes it, a novice coach or trainer can get a reading on any movement in 30 seconds or less and get information that they can actually utilize and take action on. And that's really the next step of where we're headed is um, developing this kind of like turnkey solution that is basically is a complete game changer for evidence-based programming. Um, without the skill expertise or time requirements that have historically been the case, and including these crucial movements like rotation, that matter so much.
Traditionally, when we're testing athletes, it's like one person will have a turn, and then you get through the whole program, but it'll take hours and hours and lots of sitting around. You mentioned you can pretty much get through one athlete in 5 minutes, and that's 17 tests, I think you
That's
mentioned.
Yeah, like usually a standard, usually one of the, pre-built, we've got all this whole library of tests, and you can create your own, but typically anywhere from 10 to 20 movements will be tested, and the time requirement is anywhere from 2 to 7 minutes. We often we have a whole onboard trainer certification, and it's actually very time efficient, but and like an onboarding process, and we encourage and strongly recommend that first time testers go through it twice, and we've got a feature where you can like redo and it will wipe clean the data because there's first time bias that we've discovered. So when we do our like macro data analysis, we like to ignore first time testing because it's just you're learning something new. Fortunately, we're at a place now though that it's becoming a lot more accessible and widely known, and we're in so many more places that we're finding a lot of these instances where athletes are go into a gym and they're like, oh, I've been using this at the other place I've been at or my school or whatever it is for the last year, so I'm a pro, and that's really good. But yeah, you might test 17 movements in like 5-6 minutes. And we have a group testing feature too, so you can alternate athletes. So it fits into these busy environments really well. And our job is to basically have the technology adapt to a facility instead of having a facility try to change their operation around how we've built things. So I think we've done a good job on that. And we've had so many instances where we do like combine day testings that we just did one recently at Boston College baseball, and we tested like 40 players in 2 hours or something like that. With this group testing mode, but maybe 3 hours. And then delivered to the strength coach. Here are all the insights for the team. Macro, exposed some incredible things. I mean, the biggest things are just these opportunities for improvement, and we say improvement that people should care about because we've already established that those areas that need improvement, they actually translate to on-field performance.
Yeah, that's what I liked as well. But before you talked about a 50-watt improvement in, I can't remember what it was, trunk rotation or something.
50 watt, every 50 watts that you gain in shot put power on Proteus equals 1 mile an hour gained in exit velocity.
Okay. Wow. So it's I mean, it can actually see the improvements, and you can actually see the difference as you go, and you can go back and continue testing yourself, and that's going to translate to improved performance.
Yeah, I mean it's very clear. It's like if you test on Proteus for the first time and you are at this number for this movement, that means that like statistically you should be throwing this fast, right?
Yeah.
And that's been established independently, those kinds of relationships. And because of that, it's certified the importance of these movements and these metrics, which intuitively you know are important, but until you really know what the relationship is, and when someone does a movement and it's like a 400 watts, they're like, is that good? Is that like, what does that mean? We now have the answers to that. And of course you get a percentile number. If you said, I want to compare myself to, male college age baseball player or any sport, it's going to tell you for that demographic, like what percentile exactly are you in for this movement and this metric. And based on that, that's how we deliver a lot of these recommendations. It's extraordinarily powerful. And honestly, it's just the beginning, because we're really only focusing right now on 2 of these 20 proprietary metrics, and just banking and saving the de-identified, raw data for all. Last year we recorded 100 million reps, and this is like a new normative database that includes insights like, if you're a 65-year-old female, right, where should you be across all these different movements, and how does power change as you age, and these incredible insights, including like you lose power for rotational movements 18% faster than basic uniplanar movements. So as you get older, like those are the movements that decline the fastest. And there's key differences between demographics, males and females. As an example, females lose 53% of power by their 70s compared to their peak in their late 20s. Males lose only 40%, but they peak a little later in their 30s. And it's some incredible new insights. And this is just the beginning of what we're going to start to extract and start to apply this to longevity, and far beyond athletics.
Yeah, wow, that sounds like it's an amazing piece of equipment that, like you said, it's been used in hospitals for rehabilitation. It's started off more, I guess, potentially in that athletic space, but has now it's really, really growing in that sort of 60 to 65 age group, I think you mentioned. So it seems like it's got a very, very functional aspect to it. Another thing, if I'm looking at the videos of the equipment being utilized, you've got like a touchscreen interface, which seems quite easy to use, and that's how you set up your testing and stuff like that. Is that correct?
Yeah, the screen is how you operate Proteus. So you log in, you can go into performance testing. There's an entire library of tests to choose from. You can build your own super great, well-designed user experience and interface, and then the screen will just walk you through exactly what exercise to do, the instructions of it, the whole thing. It's all basically automated. You can control the screen from there's a little button controller on the handle too, so you can use it independent of supervision. And then you see the results right there. And from the screen, you can share the test results, and the recommendations to mobile phone, to email. You can, certain tiers of the software allow for API integrations, and those capabilities are where we're really focused right now. Is like the action plans and the training programs that are based on this data that only we possess, and the intelligence that we've built behind it, to basically provide a really prescriptive plan or program designed for an individual, based on their needs, as determined from the Proteus test results, and in some cases that will incorporate not recommendations that are for tools and training equipment that are available at that specific location or facility. So we're starting to output the programs through like a mobile app, basically, that guides you through these different programming tools. And we're using right now some third-party apps to experiment that. But this is really turnkey automated fitness programming is essentially what this is evolving into, but only to make it a big time saver for a coach or trainer, and let them focus, instead of stumbling through a lengthy FMS or something like that, is like just a 5-minute full body strength and power assessment, and then and then you don't have to spend 40 minutes designing a program, but you can tweak whatever we output, and deliver it. And that's translating to great results, awesome retention, um, and a really powerful service.
You mentioned earlier on that the equipment or Proteus appeared on the Netflix series Quarterback with Kansas City Chiefs triple Super Bowl winning quarterback Patrick Mahomes.
Mm-hmm.
Was this something you knew was happening, or was this just a surprise?
I knew it was happening. Well, I knew that Patrick was being filmed for the series, and I knew that some of the filming uh, of him on Proteus was being done. And I knew that maybe like 9 months prior. And the interesting thing is, like, we had been working with Mahomes for, I don't know, 18 months prior to this, and we weren't really allowed to talk about it. And that was through this relationship we developed with Bobby Stroop, who's his trainer, became an adopter of Proteus, and he's phenomenal. And so but it was kind of closed off what was going on, but I knew that something was happening. We didn't really know if we're going to make the cut, right? And this is organic, so it ended up being the kind of like placement that I think people would pay a lot of money for. But like all of our growth has been just word of mouth and organic, so it was really awesome. So in some ways, it was a surprise that like we ended up in 3 episodes very prominently. But I think it's just a function of like it's a truthful reflection of what he does.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a reflection of the power of the equipment,
yeah,
and a reflection on the work and effort that Mahomes puts into his preparation.
yeah. I mean, I mean, I feel like I've heard companies recently talk about how they're the reason for an athlete's success, and it's like Holmes doesn't need any of this stuff. He's just he's incredible talent. Um, but we're definitely thankful, grateful, and appreciative that he's finding value in it, and it's helping. It's pretty clear. So there is definitely some relationship there, but yeah, it's pretty cool. The similar things have happened with John Rahm, Bryson DeChambeau, Damian Lillard in the NBA, and I think we've got probably 25% of Major League Baseball players are like regularly using our product at their off-season training facilities, and in some cases the teams. So it's in the pro elite space, it's all been organic adoption, but it's really picked up, and that is funny because 7 years ago I'd be like begging a high school baseball player to see if he would just grab the handle, and so here we are.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you must pinch yourself realizing, you've got one of the biggest names in the NFL using your equipment on a series that's streamed around the globe. I mean, you can watch it in Australia, down at the bottom of Australia in Tasmania. You can watch it wherever you are in the world. And you've also got Proteus in other NFL teams, the NBA, Major League Baseball, NHL, the PGA, and a lot of other sports, hospitals, and places around, like I think you said, America and Canada. It must be, again, pretty amazing for you to think 7 years ago when you were starting this off, you'd be here.
Frankly, it's great, and then but it's like we've been working really hard. There's no overnight success, and frankly, I'm always very confident that we'd get to this point, but I thought it would be earlier. I thought we'd get there faster than it's taken, and either way, like we're just getting started. So it's a really interesting moment in time right now where there's a lot of great technology and tools out there. I think there's soon to become kind of a consolidation or a thinning out of like the winners. The best tools in these categories are the ones that are going to become standard. Then there's going to be kind of a suite of these tools together across these different measurement systems. We're a big fan of like what Valve is doing. I think that's great products like super complementary with what we do in a lot of ways. There's a lot of awesome other tools like that. And it's just, there's a curated selection that's coming, that we feel like we're going to have just a standard place in, as each one of these tools is the ultimate and the premier tool for, bar none, for that kind of category. So it's cool to be a part of this emerging space, and we're involved in some very exciting ventures that are, I think, going to help drive this expansion as amidst the changing market.
Yeah, and I was going to ask about going international in Australia. Sports that are really big here are, we've got 4 different football codes. 3 of them are contact sports, Australian football, and the 2 rugby codes. We've also got cricket, which is a similar sort of sport to baseball in some instances. There'd be a lot of crossover, I'd say, in terms of some of the way that the athletes train in cricket and compared to baseball, and the rugby codes and AFL compared to NFL and basketball as well. What are your plans in terms of moving internationally?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, again, I'll say that, yes, I think it's fair to be thinking about movements that are similar, but at the end of the day, like, walking is a rotational movement, right? So it doesn't matter, what sport, it doesn't matter what activity, or lack of activity. These movements, these measurements, these modalities for training just matter for everybody, and they're essential. That said, we have over the years generated a tremendous amount of international interest, and I would say Australia is probably the leading source of like inbound, sales leads and inquiries. I'll also say, like, in that top tier, we see a lot, India, UK, Germany, you know, China, Japan, Brazil. We have been really disciplined about, lesson I learned early on is that we've got a really big vision. There's a lot of shiny objects and a tremendous amount of opportunities, and it's a mistake to try to pursue them all. So we're being really judicious about, like, okay, we're going to do something, we're going to do one thing, we're going to do it well, and then we're going to plot out the expansion. So we've been holding off on making that move, but don't quote me on this. But if I were to guess, where where the international expansion's going to go next, I think Australia is for sure in the top 3 list there. And I think it's only a matter of time. So it's coming, but I can't quite expose when or how. And I think we're really excited about it because we know there's so much talent there, across the board, and it's easily one of the most, I think, sophisticated and advanced, pool of talent in the sports performance category in the world. I think it's definitely up there at the top, and which is cool to see. So obviously that seems like a good fit.
Yeah, there was a lot of I don't know if you got much exposure to it over there, but from back here during the Olympics that we just had, there was a lot of competition between Australia and the States in the medals. And it's almost like we're ranking them medals per capita, and you're ranking like total medals. And but the it's almost like a competition to see who can be the sporting power of the world.
I will
So
say, even though I'm American, I am extremely impressed by the medals per capita, because that tells a lot about, like, just the level of skill and how widespread, sports performance abilities are, and a level there. So we're excited to pursue some of these opportunities, and it's really hard, I will say, to, like, have to say no. when we get a lot of these inquiries, but the dam will break soon, so to speak. And I think Australia is going to be top of the list.
Awesome. Well, Sam, I think we might leave it at that, but I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today on the podcast. I've learned a lot about your equipment and Proteus. I've really enjoyed listening to your story of how it started, and from being a young child or athlete, growing up with these injuries and comparing them to a friend who had a completely different set of injuries, but you got exactly the same sort of rehabilitation program, to developing something that your dad started back in the day to now being something that's being streamed across the world on Netflix, and with some of the most amazing athletes in the world. And in addition to that, you're helping people who have been injured recover and improve their lives. So you seem to be ticking a lot of boxes on a lot of fronts, and that's amazing. That I guess your brand is not just about performance, but it's also about human performance and human well-being. So, which is fantastic.
I really appreciate that, James, and it's a pleasure to have this conversation. And yes, I would agree with all those things. I think what we're doing is an important part of the future of general fitness, physical therapy, and longevity. So we're really excited to expose more of it to the world, and really enjoyed the discussion.
Awesome. And when you do start going down to Australia, start selling into Australia, you'd have to let me know, because I'm be keen to try it out.
You bet.
Thank you. Some of the key takeaways for me after having this conversation was the amazing ability of Proteus to maintain a concentric force consistently throughout a movement pattern. Traditional resistance training usually follows the pattern of a concentric phase followed by an eccentric phase. The idea of remaining concentric throughout is quite hard to imagine. I really like the way Sam explained it, comparing the increase in resistance by performing movements in water, then in honey, and then maybe in drying concrete. The other aspect I find absolutely fascinating is the physical testing capabilities of Proteus Motion. The ability to perform tests on 98% of all movements is astonishing, and within the tests, the technology is designed to report back with recommendations for developing performance further. One thing that is mind-blowing is that following the tests, you can compare your results against a range of population samples. For athletes, this is amazing. For a young quarterback in American football to compare his results against the elite NFL quarterbacks and highlight areas that need improvement is such amazing feedback. I can only imagine with this sort of data, athletic performance will be increased tenfold. Finally, while this technology is so useful for improving athletic performance, I get a genuine belief that Sam and his team at Proteus are also focused on overall health and wellness. The technology is used in hospitals for recovery and rehabilitation, and this would only improve quality of life for a lot of people, whether it be from injuries attained in accidents or from the aging process. If you'd like more information on what Proteus Motion can do, they have an extremely informative website with a lot of videos of the equipment in action. The web address is proteusmotion.com. Alternatively, you can check Proteus out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, or X, using the handle @Proteus Motion. I'll leave all the information in the show notes. If you're based outside of the USA and Canada, you might have a short wait, but without Sam giving too much away, it sounds like it could be going internationally in the not too distant future. Thanks for joining me on another podcast with another amazing guest. If you have liked this episode, please give it a review and a like, and until the next time, keep learning.